So she's already spoke to them and confirmed, oh yeah, we were here.
Sure, you heard right. The details of a jail conversation between Foolio's accused killers have come to light, and they are terrible. One of Foolio's killers even admitted that they were at the scene, even going so far as to casually discuss the murder and even hint at who hired them to carry it out. I've got all the details, so let's begin. There is much more on the tape than anyone had expected. On the phone call from the jailhouse, one of the voices said, "We got him after the kill." It was cool, almost cocky, as though they had simply won without losing. Every second of the less than 2-minute conversation was infused with a terrifying confidence that seemed to let's back up. This murder story and the voices behind that conversation are far more complicated than a single phone call. The sort of thing that makes your skin crawl, yet more organized than chaotic. Giulio Foolio was shot dead on June 23, 2024, in Tampa, Florida, at what was purported to be a birthday celebration. That night, he had been posting on social media, advising admirers where to drive up and inviting them to a pool party. He did not, however, realize that his followers were not admirers, but foes. The suspects used social media and direct surveillance to follow Foolio across the city, according to law authorities. The shooters waited until nearly 4:30 in the morning to strike directly outside a Holiday Inn Foolio, and authorities subsequently identified them as Sean Gaywright, Richard Murphy, and Davian Murphy, along with 2 additional suspects. Multiple firearms were fired at the ambush, wounding 3 more victims but allowing them to survive, despite being charged with aiding in the preparation. Prosecutors say that Isaiah Chance and Elisa Andrews' apparent desire to transform a murder into a performance was what really brought this group together. Unprecedented coordination among the 5 accused demonstrated that they shared the same objective. They came to Tampa with the intention of killing the source, according to the state attorney, and we now know how they felt once the task was finished. In the recording of the leaked jailhouse call, which was captured a few days after their arrests and distributed to local media before being made public online, one of the suspects can be heard joking about the fallout and referencing the extensively circulated news reports. Please take a moment to comprehend that a guy was shot down in a public setting and that his assailants are now grinning and in jail. And they didn't even anticipate it, which is another farce. They even call Foolio by name and say, "Done."
No, this world worked hard to get shot on. Man, they shot his foot off last year, give him that pirate nub. Man, that post still got his foot shot off, ain't supposed to be bouncing around on his...
It's not just brutal murder. It's a mocking culture. Foolio was not only killed by the assassins. They're also making fun of the notion that he believed he was safe. However, the tone was what investigators found most striking. The call lacked any sense of dread, desperation, or even regret. The atmosphere was, in fact, almost joyous. In one case, the game was murder, and the police already suspected gang involvement. But as one detective who reviewed the call put it, it reminded him of chats in locker rooms. The investigation revealed hours of surveillance, cell phone records, and even license plate data that demonstrated the suspects followed Foolio from venue to venue throughout the night as part of a complex setup that culminated in tragedy. Hillsborough State Attorney's Office said during a press conference, as members of or connected to a TK and 1200, a known rival gang to Foolio's 6-block gang source, the accused were implicated.
3 shooters exit a vehicle and walked in the direction of the hotel. They murdered Jones with a handgun and 2 rifles. This barrage of gunfire also struck 3 additional victims.
Murderers not only killed Foolio, but they also ridiculed the idea that he thought he was safe. It is not just brutal murder, it is a culture of derision. However, the tone of the call there was no fear, no urgency, and not even a hint of regret was what really pulled detectives in. The atmosphere was almost celebratory. In one case, the game was murder, and the police already suspected gang involvement. But as one detective who reviewed the call put it, it reminded him of chats in locker rooms.
And they are shooting at Charles now, and you can see that he's the passenger in that car that's moving and trying to flee. And again, they're still shooting at him.
Not only is the crime being witnessed by the public, but the aftermath is also being heard, and this leaked call is causing more than just anxiety. What caused this case to become so well known online? It supports the widespread fear that some of these killings are driven more by a desire for power, and not by desperation. This contains those who criticize Foolio, are troubled since the issue is not just about her son, but also about responsibility. When the accused reacts in this way to a high-profile murder, what does that say about the next generation watching? Foolio's mother arrived for the press conference just a few hours after learning of the arrest.
His fans knew him as Foolio, but to his mom, he's Charles. We're fighting to make sure that she gets justice.
Wait until you learn what one of the suspects did right. Before the shooting, if you thought the phone call was spooky, it could uncover the setup betrayal bugs, blast this case wide open, and get most people a second jail sentence. Until something changes, how many more young black men will be remembered in hashtags? For Foolio, betrayal usually occurs in silence. But it might have started with a text message and ended with gunfire. We looked at the terrifying, haughty, and ruthless jail call that emerged days later. I've disclosed the details of how rapper Julio Foolio was assassinated by 5 suspects during his birthday weekend. The next layer of this story examines the hints that existed before the trigger was even pulled, not what transpired after the murder. In the 48 hours prior to his passing, Foolio had just arrived in Tampa and was advertising his birthday celebration on Instagram stories and other platforms. He instructed fans to pull up flashing bottles, party information, and his location on camera. What if I told you, however, that it might not have been the first time his name was mentioned in a jail call, and that one of his closest friends and relatives might have been behind the scenes?
It got to this bit. Tampa, Florida, man. Pool party push up at 5:30, 6 o'clock, man.
Not to party, but to scheme. Foolio most likely had no idea how many people were watching. It is almost impossible for opponents to track him down, according to investigators, because his location updates act as a breadcrumb trail. However, things get worse from here. The possibility that someone in Foolio's social circle purposefully revealed his location is presently being looked into, according to official police statements. The surveillance showed that Foolio was already being pursued by the suspicious vehicles from earlier places, not just at the Holiday Inn, which raises the dark question of how they found out about his whole schedule, according to Foolio's mother, who briefed state authorities. Her son was trying to protect his privacy by hiding his public posts. Friends say he was planning to switch hotels that night, but the shooters showed up there first, suggesting they were either closely monitoring him or had insider information. The story takes a sharp turn at this point, according to 2 different people who are aware of the investigation. It is reported that the tone of the second jail discussion, which has not yet been made public, was different, more cryptic and anxious, and less haughty. Inquiries such as how much they really got on us, though, who's talking, was made by one suspect. However, law enforcement has not yet verified if this second call was a confession. Cell tower, triangulation, gang affiliations, and surveillance footage combined with such questions provide the impression that suspects were aware of, although Foolio had both private and public adversaries. He also lost friends. An accomplice who had a falling out with Foolio was allegedly working covertly with competitors in ATK and 1200, who the group's law enforcement believes were behind the conspiracy. This is one of the most serious allegations underway. Although the identity of the informant has not been disclosed, The timeline had suspicious similarities to the defendant's text messages and leaked GPS data, indicating that Fio was set up by someone a former detective who is now a gang expert, says. Collaboration like this is rare outside of cartel activity. This is confirmed by several reliable sources, and if it is accurate, it would indicate that this was a planned treachery rather than merely a retaliatory strike. What is most notable is the integration of digital trail exploitation, including Instagram stories, live location, and even facial recognition cameras close to the Holiday Inn with street methods. During their chess game, a retired police officer noted that the streets were once all about muscle. The technology involved was surgical planning and observation. They chased him like a target, which is why the police are still investigating. The second jail calls so carefully because it could reveal who they thought was trustworthy and who might be lying. Even with perfect digital evidence, though, prosecutors can still run into issues. It is believed that several of the defendants, including Elisa Andrews, are thinking about entering into plea deals, but only in the event that their charges are dropped. In the past, Andrews' attorney has publicly stated that she will not forfeit her right to a speedy trial, which could lead to. At a news conference held just days after the murder, this was part of a chain reaction, and she plans to utilize that leverage to make a deal swiftly. You can bet that the agreement will reveal who is next on the list, who purchased the guns, and who gave over Foolio's location. Not holding back was Jacksonville Sheriff T.K. Waters.
These individuals have chosen lives of urban terrorism. Florida, Tampa, JSO, Jacksonville, Miami, wherever you are. Will not tolerate foolishness. Will hold you accountable for your criminal actions.
The more significant query remains. Why weren't these calls terminated sooner if they were being monitored? What gave the suspects the ability to plot such a devastating attack and then laugh about it? Especially because many of them were already under police surveillance. How are the police preventing the next high-profile crime? Particularly if the death of Fio is a part of a wider, still existing feud. The answers might be in the courtroom at this very moment. Due to reported fears that they may plot another attack, or, worse, silence a possible cooperator, the suspects were separated and are currently in jail pending trial. This is not over, and the truth will continue to surface when additional jail calls are leaked. Despite the fact that authorities have not yet identified the person who flipped, people are becoming increasingly concerned that one of the suspects, like Isaiah Chance or Elisa Andrews, has already started speaking. In addition to being placed under protective watch, the men accused of Fio's death have reportedly been kept apart from the public, and even from one another out of concern that they might plot new violent crimes or threaten possible cooperators. According to a number of legal sources familiar with Hillsborough County proceedings, this is supported by the timing of motion filings and unusual visitation restrictions. The first leaked jail conversation has already been disclosed to us. But the second call that hasn't been made public might be very different. One suspect may have consented to prosecution cooperation in return for immunity or less punishment. Tell Shorty not to make this bigger than it has to be. That leaked call reportedly had the scary remark, "Tell Shorty not to make this bigger than it got to be." It appears to have been a coded warning designed to silence someone before they turn. In this nebulous, imprecise, but undeniably deadly statement, the psychological manipulation occurring behind the scenes is demonstrated. According to reports, these suspects are not merely gang members. Prosecutors are now employing the same psychological web as one of the alleged shooters, Sean Githright, who has a documented history of using coercive tactics to control younger associates, including gaslighting, emotional leverage, and promises of financial support for families. This is because loyalty in these crews isn't about friendship, but rather about leverage and the implicit understanding that snitching means your family becomes a target. Insiders say he controls the jail system like a mob, and even men in the system are scared of him. It becomes complex at this point because one suspect has the chance to alter the tale, which is leveraged in reverse. Investigators apparently are trying to determine whether Foolio himself knew he was being set up. In one of his final posts before his death, Foolio writes, "If you ain't got the ati, you're not meant to be there." He used several hotels and posted cryptic recordings of himself glancing over his shoulder, which some believe indicate paranoia or even foreknowledge that he was trying to mislead someone, according to a local writer who has spent years researching gang violence in Jacksonville. The line might have been coded, even if it seems like a straightforward party flex. Message: she says he knew they were after him, but he didn't know when they made their move. Speaking of Pounce, the U.S. Marshals, who assisted in the capture of Richard, Murphy and Davian made use of the kind of tactical force that is often saved for federal fugitives. Why are the streets being sealed down, SWAT-style takedowns, and pre-dawn raids so intense? Since these suspects were not only suspected shooters, was believed that they also had access to burner phones, hidden weapons, network support from other gang affiliates, and more, concerning an unsealed affidavit stating that investigators were concerned about retaliation hits. This suggests that these killings were not isolated incidents, but rather were a part of a larger war that may have been reignited by Foolios surprisingly. Even law enforcement is getting ready for the next step: murder. In the gang world, loyalty is transactional, so if someone inside the operation cooperates, their entire family becomes vulnerable to retaliation. This is only the beginning if Foolio's gang really thinks someone flipped. The Tampa Police Department and Jacksonville Sheriff's Office have responded by stepping up their monitoring of known gang hangouts, employing social media analysts to keep an eye on prospective threats, and even reaching out to the relatives of possible targets confiscated within that facility, since those digital traces contain information regarding who actually performed the role and who pulled the strings. Following an arrest that no one anticipated, a startling new defendant showing up in court, a crucial witness's confession that completely appends the case, another arrest, and Foolio's last secret: we finally learn the truth. They thought that 5 suspects, 5 murder charges, and 5 individuals were responsible for organizing the premeditated ambush of Jacksonville rapper Julio Foolio over his birthday weekend in Tampa, Florida, which should have been the high point of his year. But as the city prepared for the trial, everyone was shocked to learn that there was a 6th man, and no, he wasn't, although he wasn't a known shooter or even a street member. Investigators think he might have pulled the ropes in the SUV. He had access to calendars, hotel bookings, performance schedules, and, most significantly, Foolio's trust during his time as a business manager. Though he continued to pose as an insider and supposedly remained close to Foolio following a quiet disagreement, law enforcement now believes that this man was providing rival affiliates with a TK and 1200 real-time intelligence behind the scenes. Conversations on WhatsApp are recovered from suspect Elisa's burner phone by digital forensics. Let the streets take care of it. Just make sure the dude doesn't move last minute again. Although Andrew's name was not in the chat, the prosecutors say the pattern, timing, coordination, and context match only one person, and when they brought him in for questioning, he folded. This is according to sealed grand jury testimony. This 6th man admitted that he thought Foolio had it coming, since he thought Foolio had been overly domineering and suspicious and was about to terminate several team members a few weeks after his birthday celebration. According to reports, his reward was a 5-figure sum that was disbursed via a network of third-party digital wallets and little Cash App transfers. Information to aid the snipers in anticipating Foolio's actions, such as the final confirmation of his Holiday Inn switch, which the police say sealed his fate. However, this is where the pain starts. The initial news of Foolio's murder had already crushed his fans, and they had no idea that someone who had previously stood behind the rapper on stage, grinning in interviews, waving iced-out chains and flashing peace signs would be implicated in the plot. More painful than the deluge of tributes on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok was the betrayal, but so were the rumors, theories, and rage. On X, formerly Twitter, a fan posted, "Foolio never expected his own team. He always said the ops wouldn't take him." Another posted hashtags like "Justice for Foolio," #6 block forever, and "They set him up," which trended for days. Even some of Fio's former Rivals expressed disgust at the way he died. One Jacksonville underground artist tweeted, "We ain't never with Brew, but that's set up shit." One of the most controversial voices to speak out about Fio's death was Charleston White, a vocal cultural critic known for his controversial views on rap culture and street violence. A reaction video that Charleston released within hours of the news emerging went viral, with some people praising his candor and others condemning him for dancing on the man's grave. But the memorable part of the film was the line that followed your repeated "rest in peace" statements. For these boys, there was never calm. They were born into and reared in a fight, and you all watched it like a movie. Foolio was happy with his tattoos, rivalries, and six-block character. But he was still a 26-year-old guy whose mother crossed the entire state to find her son's body. It was supposed to be a celebration, but instead of just reposts and rips, the post garnered nearly 5 million views in a single day across Jacksonville and Tampa. Murals of Fio began to sprout, his visage visible in spray-painted tributes. Signs and lyrics. One of the most touching demonstrations was a vigil conducted by a group of high school students in Jacksonville, who burned candles and rapped along to his breakthrough song. He gave us the impression that if you managed to escape 6 block, you could go anywhere, a teenager who was a thief at the vigil told local news. Nevertheless, the melancholy also created tension when someone scribbled, "We know who did it." This isn't over on the wall outside the Holiday Inn. This forces Tampa police to increase patrols around the Foolio murder scene. Then, the most disturbing development of all occurred while Foolio's family was clearing out his belongings. They found a digital safe, an encrypted hard drive with audio data, voice memos, and photos. Forensic experts have now verified that one of the recordings was made 11 days before his death. Prosecutors are currently using the recording as part of their ongoing inquiry. In closing, Foolio makes the somber prediction that one of them would be the one to smile in my face if something were to happen to me. He seems worn out by betrayal, by stake, and most of all, by acting as though I can't even sleep unless I'm facing away from the wall. He says I'm suspicious of everyone, including people I consider family. While the other 5 suspects in what may be one of the most well-known gang-related murders are still awaiting trial. The 6th suspect has been officially charged. Fio's followers are split as the legal proceedings go on. Some are demanding revenge, while others are urging solidarity and begging rival gangs and Fio's remaining crew members to break the pattern before another young man is left with a mural rather than a landmark. But there's no doubt that this wasn't just another rapper killed. It was Charles Jones, a young man from one of Jacksonville's most impoverished neighborhoods, who had nothing but a microphone and a voice before being silenced not by his adversaries, but by those who should have been protecting him. There will be reckonings rather than trials when the courthouse doors eventually open because Fio left behind proof and a warning, and a heritage demanding fairness. We appreciate your time and interest. Please check one of the boxes to see more videos like this one.